If this is your, I mean, I'm sure that no one is first time, but some are from AB, some probably from Metta, some are both. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us in this dialogue tonight, organized jointly by AEB, Association of Engaged Buddhists and Metta Center. So if you don't know AEB or Metta Center, they're both not-for-profit organizations aiming to serve the wider community through the skillful and practical teaching of the Buddha. So Metta Center was founded by our fabulous Tina Ng. So Metta Center is a center for spiritual practice, pursuing charitable purposes that advance social welfare and peace within individual families and community and in the world. So they are guided by the principles of Buddhism to do what is good, to avoid what is evil, and to purify the mind. And Association of Engaged Buddhists, as some of you know, that we formed by a group of lay Buddhist practitioners. Some of them are here tonight. And we're supported by an ordained Sangha, which is Bhante Teja Dhammo. So both organizations offering Dhamma talks, meditation practice, meditation retreats, and community services. So Associations of Engaged Buddhists has a beautiful retreat center at the Southern Highland of New South Wales called Vejasala, which means a place of healing where we hold most of our retreats. So if you're looking for a community to practice and learn, we wish to be able to support you mentally and spiritually in a safe, caring, and supportive environment. So tonight, we're very excited and very grateful to have this dynamic duo, David Oros and Tina Ng, back here today to bring us to embark on the profound journey into exploring different meditation approaches and tapping into the timeless wisdom of the Buddha in both traditional and contemplative practices. So for those who haven't met Tina or David, so I'll just give you a very brief introduction of who they are. So Tina Ng is the founder and president of the Metta Center and also the principal solicitor of Metta Legal, a law firm that deals with cases relating to family law, child protection, property, wills and estates, civil litigation, and guardianship matters. So she's an accredited mediator at Metta Resolution, which provides mediation training and coaching to resolve conflict in the community and within families. And Tina often uses a real life experience in her teaching, which I really find it very interesting and very relatable and very inspirational. And David is a man that walked his talk and lived a very happy and effortless life that many men envy. He's an experienced leader of meditation groups, both in Sydney and Hong Kong. And he often said that his approach is very simple. His aim of practice is the living experience of a meditative approach to everyday life. So ladies and gentlemen, let us put our hand together to welcome our teacher tonight, Tina Ng and David Oros. Thank you again for being here with us tonight, Tina and David. Over to you, Tina.
Thanks so much, Meredith. So good evening, everyone, and welcome. For those who haven't joined David and my sessions, we do things a bit differently, perhaps to what you may be used to. So instead of just delivering a Dhamma talk and it's just a one-way conversation, we try to make these sessions really interactive. And also it's a safe space for all of us to be able to share, learn from each other, and just explore what are our practices and how can we support each other and explore different types of meditative practices. So I encourage you for this evening as well as next Thursday evening to please be a part of our conversation in whatever way that you feel comfortable. So you can either just open and talk, so just unmute yourself and participate in the discussion, or if you prefer, you can also pop it into the chat as well. So I'll be monitoring the chat as we go along, and I will be also asking some reflective questions as we go through. David and I will have some exercises for you as well. David and my approach is actually very similar. We don't prepare for these talks, so we really are here for you. So whatever arises from our discussion, that is what we can talk about. So we are open, all ears, hearts open, ready to have these two events with you. So the topic that we'll be exploring is about exploring meditative practices. And it's a beautiful topic to explore because maybe some of you have been practicing Buddhism or other types of meditation methods for a period of time now. Maybe you're beginners exploring what the different types of meditation practices are. So what we want to talk about is, yeah, we can talk about those traditional practices, but also there's other types of meditative practices that you may not have heard of, or there may be some meditative practices which occur not just on the cushion in formal practice, but in your day-to-day life. So these 2 evenings that we have with you is to explore some of that. How do we make meditation real in your day-to-day? How do we make life a meditation and contemplative type of way of living? So I'm really excited to be here with all of you, and I'm looking forward to our discussions. So as for the start of this, I would like to hand over the virtual mic over to David for him just to give us an opening about the exploring meditative practices and how that resonates with him. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Tina, and Meredith for the wonderful opportunity to be here and the lovely way you introduce it. I love the way that you say that I'm, Meredith, you said that I'm Mr. Effortless and sort of equanimity, and I've somehow cultivated that image. But I have to be honest with you, today I've spent considerable time trying to even get myself on board here to get my mobile hotspot. I'm not a brilliant computer nerd and had a few hitches. So my equanimity was deeply disturbed. So I'm going to start off with a contemplative practice in vivo to to help me out, right? So I'm the client, I'm the one who needs one of these contemplative practices. And I'm going to choose a Tibetan practice called Tonglen to start with. And Tonglen meditation is where you breathe in the suffering, or in my case, whatever you imagined. And I guess we've all been through from time to time situations where we're flustered and we'd like to be cool, calm and collected, but inwardly we're thinking, oh no, is this going to work? And all that sort of stuff. So take yourself there to where you imagine that. And I can tell you, that's actually what happened to me for the 5 minutes before, a bit of sheer panic when I thought I wasn't going to be able to hook up. So what we do in this Tonglen meditation is to breathe in, and I'm going to ask you all to breathe in the suffering, the feelings of upset and frustration and so forth of David, and take it into the heart of loving kindness within yourself. And you mix it, it's almost like you breathe it into the heart. And then as you breathe out, you send David peace, harmony, love, compassion, and just you do a few rounds of that, and I'll be the willing recipient of this healing meditation called Tonglen, Tonglen. And I'll let you know what happens to me as I just open myself to receive Tonglen meditation from this lovely group. So you're breathing in the frustration, the panic of David. You bring it into the heart of compassion, of Metta, within your own being. And then just sending out the intention, may David be peaceful, be happy, be liberated. We'll just do a few rounds of that, and I'll just receive this wonderful meditative, contemplative blessing. So as I open myself to receive this lovely gift from you, it works immediately. I feel a sense of effortless presence coming back straight away. And there's a sort of just a wonderful, sort of relaxed, joyful feeling. And it works like magic. And so this is a wonderful practice that you can do for others, people who may be suffering illness of some sort or some sort of emotional upheaval. And just, even for a few minutes, just like that, it's really, really wonderful for the practitioner as much as for the person that you're helping. So I thank you for your gift, and I feel so much more at ease and present now. It's so simple. So that's a good example of a Tibetan meditative practice, which I often use. And it's as I said, it's possibly the main beneficiary is the one who's actually doing the meditation. But as well, of course, it's something, it overcomes feelings of helplessness if somebody's going through difficulty and we can't do a lot. When we're sitting meditating, we immediately feel like we're doing something helpful, and it calms us down and helps very much in the relationship. So that's one lovely Tibetan practice which I wanted to mention. The other one that I've been exploring lately is a contemplative art which is called Miksang, another Tibetan practice. Miksang is photography, but it's not just the usual click sort of photography. It's a practice where we're not trying to take a pretty picture or a well sort of composed picture, but we're just open to whatever it is that catches our eye. Whatever comes into awareness. We might be walking along, and one of my teachers who shared her experience of this Miksang was walking along, she's in London, and she was walking along a sort of busy street, and she just saw a white plastic bag, of all things, curled up in a corner, and then a breeze just took it and sort of opened it, it unfurled, and it just rested in a particular shape which caught her eye. And she immediately took a picture of that. And it was a work of art, the sort of immediacy, the spontaneity, and of all things plastic. But it was beautiful in its own way. So any object can be the object of contemplation. So this art in photography is called Miksang, and I'll put into the chat a link, or in fact, I'll tell you about it. It's there's a podcast called the Awareness Podcast, which if you just wanted to look up, that goes straight to my teacher called Jenny Beale, who she is talking to a woman called Helen Vink, who is a practitioner of Miksang, and you'll get this wonderful podcast. I'm going to read out her introduction because it gives you a bit of an idea of how somebody comes to a contemplative practice. Helen was one of the people who would be the last person in the world you'd think to be interested in this sort of thing, as you'll hear from her bio. But let me read this to you. Helen Vink is a practitioner and teacher of Miksang, M-I-K-S-A-N-G. a method of contemplative photography. In her late teens, she was an expert ice skater and focused on all her efforts on becoming an Olympic speed skater. But 2 weeks before the Dutch Championships, an accident put an end to her Olympic dream, and her whole world came crashing down. She felt totally lost, initially lacking any clear direction. She spent much of her time partying, discovering normal life, and experimenting with drugs. I heard the backstory. She really did get into it. Her love of art led her to art school, where she studied photography and sculpture. However, the contemporary art scene wasn't what she was really looking for. After another period of despair, she came across the Dharma arts teaching of spiritual teacher Qigong Trungpa and discovered her innocent, childlike joy. I love that. Her focus was initially on the Dharma arts, but she went on to learn meditation and study the Shambhala teachings in Tibetan Buddhism, living and working in Shambhala centers in France and the US. After a number of years, her Dharma teacher, Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche, encouraged her to go back out into the world. She completed her Miksang training and qualified as a Miksang teacher with Michael Wood, who developed the original curriculum for Miksang training. And she now runs Miksang courses in Europe and online, sharing her joy and freedom of being fully present and connected with the beauty of our ordinary everyday experience. So you can check her out, and I'd recommend you have a listen to that podcast. It's really wonderful. So that's another. So all you need to do, and even with an iPhone these days, you know, it's quite good enough. But you can go as far as you like with the actual, you know, camera, and just, you know, have it in your bag and see what occurs to you. My first photo that I took with this Miksang awareness, I was in Rushcutters Bay, and just walking along, there's a lovely wall, and you get the lovely harbour views and the boats just bobbing up and down. And normally I'd be, you know, sort of doing the classic photo shoot, but I just sat down on a bench and just sort of allowed this contemplation. I wonder what a Miksang photographer might do. And as I looked at the wall, I noticed there was a hole in the wall. It was a sandstone wall, a very small hole. And so I thought, what would happen if I just lie down and right next to that wall and just take a picture through the wall, not knowing what it's going to show? And so I clicked my little phone, and the most amazing photograph came up. It was like a sandstone cave, a little tiny, you know, hole in the wall, and it opened out to the Sydney Harbour. And it was, you know, one of the loveliest spontaneous shots I've ever taken. So Miksang can arise and want to express itself if you just open to it. I'd recommend that's a wonderful practice. So that's a bit of an example of the. Oh, there we are. There it is. That's brilliant. Who was the clever one? Tina. You can see that little hole in the wall. And I think there's another one there, isn't there, Tina, of actually looking.
I take no credit for this. This is probably Meredith's good doing. Oh,
right. Did I do the one where you could actually see the picture through the sandstone, through the?
That's the one that you sent to me. Oh, the sandstone. Oh, okay.
Yeah. If you look, there's another one where you can actually look through that hole at the image that you see is blurred, but you can see the detail of the cave. Anyway, you can imagine it if we can't find it. Thanks, Meredith.
Okay.
So that's just an example of the approach that you can have, and it's a wonderful deepening practice. And what it does is it teaches you to have that readiness and that awareness, and not to miss the ordinariness of everyday life. And there's the next one I took was of just walking along. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So you can see that little hole. Look at that. I was fascinated by the cave-like quality, and then the view through there. Something about it being blurred which appealed to me. But that's not the usual sort of picture that I would take. So that's thanks for that, Meredith, for putting that up. That's exactly what I wanted to share with you. So that's my first example of Miksang photography. Okay.
I love it. It's a really nice, it's not just a nice photo visually, but also the heart and the fact that you saw it. Other people would see something that's broken. And to you, you saw that, which is beautiful.
Saw it and snapped it. Yeah. So there's a whole range, of course, of artistic, musical, writing practices which you could use that idea of breaking the mold of trying to do something perfect, and just whatever presents itself to your awareness as you carry a little pen. And of course, poets and writers often do that, don't they? They mine just everyday life for ideas for their next thing. This is a contemplative type of practice. Some other more classical ones, which I'll mention, and we can talk about if you like. Of course, the meditation on impermanence is another wonderful meditation where we can, literally go to a graveyard, and instead of being sort of turned off, we turn towards it, and just allow that understanding, which is present with all the graves in the graveyard, to remind us of impermanence in a very immediate way. And just to contemplate that can be very powerful. And similarly, we can meditate on emptiness, the reality that whatever we're seeing in the objective world is formless, as well as being apparently form. Like my little cave, if you look closer and imagine if you had an electron microscope and you kept going, ultimately, you'd come to the little tiny sub-quarks and goodness knows what else, and everything would disappear. So the contemplation on emptiness is a wonderful one to break up attachments and to realize that we're all an appearance in awareness, or Buddha mind, if you like, without that sort of, concreteness which we normally think of when we identify ourselves as a separate being. Another lovely contemplation is on the interdependence of everything. So, we might see an orange, and instead of just the usual way that we relate to the orange, we can place it in the totality. We can think of the sun shining on it. We can think of the rain falling on it. We can think about the person who planted the tree. We can think about how everything, that the entire universe actually comes together to create this orange. And we can choose any object to contemplate. Some of the other lovely ones, of course, Tina, you're going to tell us more at some point, I'm sure, about Metta meditation and loving kindness, and that's a beautiful one. I'll leave that one to you. And also Vipassana, that's one of your lovely ones that we can talk about, insight into reality. The other one that I like to explore, and this is a fairly esoteric practice, but it can be very, very simple as well. The practice of working with the Zen koan. And when you first hear about the koans, they're like, they do your head in, what does it mean? Even the simple one, like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? But once you sit with that in a contemplative way, it takes you to what took me to an amazing place. The first thing is the mind is just lost. I mean, how does it make sense? One hand clapping. It's ridiculous, and that's often the first response to working with the koan. But as I worked with it over a period of time, and I imagined, one hand clapping against what? Of course, nothingness. But really, is it nothingness? And then I sort of thought, well, what if you bring the material objective world to meet emptiness, what would be the sound of that? And I just quieted myself and wondered about that. And then suddenly I just fell into emptiness and fullness coming together. And it was sort of thunderous, you know. It was an amazing sort of fullness of all the senses that happened, and just taking that contemplation day by day over a period of time. And suddenly the meaning, the experience, not the concept, revealed itself. So you can be surprised. So you can take almost any Zen koan and play with it and go quite deeply with it. There are many others. Of course, one of my favorites is Thich Nhat Hanh's approach to walking meditation, which is a beautiful one. I like to do this, especially if I'm doing any intensive meditation for a period of time. The body seems to ask, hey, how about me? You know, get off the cushion and go and have a stretch and go for a walk. And it's not just going for a walk, but Thai would say, every step a lotus beneath your feet, and you're kissing the earth with your feet. So you slow down and you feel that wonderful connection with every step that you take, and see how that changes the way that you walk. You know, I've seen Thai walking with a group of monks, and they're all as one, you know, kissing the earth. And what a beautiful practice that can be. There are many others. I'll just mention a couple more. The body scan is another beautiful meditative practice where we can scan the body from head to foot very slowly and just invite any contractions or limitations just to open up. And you know, this can be done over a long period of time with wonderful benefits to the body and the mind. Mantra meditation is another beautiful one, and you can take almost any mantra, but the one that, just the very simple one that I like working with is Om. When we first hear Om, we see it often spelled as O-M, but we can think of it as comprised of A-U-M. And one of my teachers explained to me that this very simple mantra contains everything. The Ah is the opening, the beginning. The formless comes into form at that point. And the Ow, the mouth fills up. There's a filling up, a fullness. And then the is the closing. So Ow. And then in a group, you repeat that, and there's no beginning, there's no end. It's just here now. So I'd suggest we just try doing that together and see what your experience of just chanting this beautiful, wonderfully profound mantra. So let's go. So if we were to do that for a period of time, and we could hear everyone simultaneously, which I haven't figured out how to do, you would have just one continuous sound. And that's a living example of the continuity of what we are. We often identify with this separateness, which is something which is born and dies. But when we touch into that meditation, we touch into something wonderful. So that's a brief introduction. Of course, there are many more practices which perhaps you can share your favorites. But I'd like to now take it back to Tina, if you'd like to invite people, having heard a couple of those, if that takes you somewhere, Tina, we could ask people to join in a bit more with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And what a great list that you've got going here. So for those who can see the screen, I've just been popping down what David has said in terms of each of the different types of practices. And if you're interested in any of these, then you can, of course, explore them further. So I'm going to tell you guys a story soon. But before I do, I want to pose a question to all of you. And I'm going to pop that into the chat, which is, what type of meditation practice do you find useful? So what do you do? So I would like to hear from you. And you could just pop your answers into the chat box. And if you have more than one meditation practices, you are, of course, very welcome to put more than one down. Would you like to hear a story?
Just before that, Tina, so in case if anyone, if you don't know how to put the chat, if you see that there's a chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you click on that, you will see the text on the side, so you can see all the texts that all the messages that we put in the chat box. So if you have, if you need any helps, you can just, let us know. Okay.
Great. Thanks so much for that. Yes. So we've got some answers coming through, which is great. So we'll come back to that. And while people are typing, I will share a short story. So I thought I'll share this story after hearing David's first choice of meditation practice, which is Tonglen, and the practice that we did today. And I want to share this story because I would just want you to see that these practices that we're talking about, that you can take them anywhere with you, right? Just see these different practices almost like a toolbox. And depending on what arises in a particular situation, you can then look into your toolbox and see what is the practice that works. And sometimes what arises for you may not be what you thought would be the best practice, but something that just comes to you. And that is what is most applicable in that moment. So I'm going to share with you a story. And it's a story that I don't tell often, actually, because it's a story that is very close to my heart. So not long ago, I had a good friend of mine, his father was passing away. And so my husband and I were invited to come and visit him when he was in palliative care in hospital. And when we arrived, he was in a lot of pain and he was about to get some new morphine shots. And we knew that if that was going to happen, he was probably not going to be able to speak to us that evening, but he was in just so much pain. And the nurse was actually in the process of getting that medication ready to see him. So my husband Zen and I, we went in and we saw what he was like. And what came to me was just this practice of contemplation of virtue. Okay, so for those who haven't practiced this before or heard of this, they call it contemplation or recollection of virtue. In Pali, it's called Sila Nusati. And it's one of the 6 things to recollect. And I'll put the others into the chat. So the 6 recollections is you can recollect on the Buddha, the qualities of the Buddha. You can recollect on the Dhamma, the Sangha, generosity, virtues, and the Devas. Okay, so I'm going to pop that into the chat for you. So what I did was, in some ways, I kind of led him through that recollection of virtues. So we started to recollect some of the good deeds that he's done, some of the things that I know he has done, and that I can rejoice with him in terms of what he does. And it was really interesting because talking to me, he actually became more lively, more energetic. The nurse came in and asked him whether or not he wanted his morphine, and he said, no, I want to keep talking. And in fact, he kept talking for hours until like 9:30, and he didn't. And we were the ones that were like, I think you need to rest. We need to go. It was just really, really interesting that he just changed. And his wife, who was there, kept making the remarks like, you can talk to us this way. But with Zen and me there, we were allowing him to recollect and brighten his mind, importantly, And he brightens his mind, actually not through talking to us, it's because he was recollecting on the virtues, on the good things that he's done, with gratitude for his life. And also in that session, we were able to talk about that because of his life and what he has done, it's a letting go process as well. So it was quite a beautiful session. So I'm sharing this with you because if you feel that sometimes yourself or someone is in a really dark place, you can consider recollecting on some of these, right? Having some contemplation or reflection, particularly of your generosity and your virtues. So every day you could do this. Every day you can recollect, just at the end of the day, when you're sitting in bed about to sleep, what were some of the good things that you've done throughout the day? And just brighten your mind. Because sometimes what can happen is we get really bogged down by our negative thoughts that we're not good enough, that we're not, we've made mistakes, or when we think about the day that's passed, we're thinking, oh, I should have done that, I shouldn't have said this. But we don't actually take the time enough to reflect on our virtues and our generous qualities. Okay, so that was one part of the story. Then, not long after, we received a text to say that it's probably going to be my friend's last day. So again, my husband and I were invited to attend, and we were very honoured because this was really his last moments. And when we arrived, he was at a state where he was about to pass. And for me, my go-to meditation in situations like this is metta meditation. So I was ready to sit and just do lots of metta meditation. But when I sat down, what came to me was Tonglen. And I hardly ever practice Tonglen, can I tell you? I learnt this ages ago, and it's just never really clicked for me for some reason. But that day, I just felt the suffering in the room, the family crying, I really just felt that pain. So I naturally just went into Tonglen. And in that practice, I was drawing in all of the suffering, all of the pain, all of the angst into me. And I could feel that tightening, that tightness that comes with pain and tension and suffering. I can actually feel that as a physical sensation. And then as it comes into me, what I share out and send out is light and peace and courage and love, all of those qualities that I want to send to this person. And the interesting thing is, it really felt physically, not just mentally, a difference in what was being received and what was sent. And that went for some time. And then at one point, when I was drawing in the pain, there was nothing coming to me. It was like everything just stopped. And I checked and I thought, is it because I got distracted? Is it because I missed the mark here? But no, it was just nothing was coming. And in my mind, I call him Uncle. So in my mind, I just went, Uncle, are you still here? And I knew at that time that he had passed. And then not long after, I heard some shuffling around the room, and people were starting to feel his temperature because it was getting cold. They called the nurse in, and the nurse was checking to see whether or not he was still there. And I knew he was no longer there. And not surprisingly, the nurse then said that he has passed, right? Later on, I shared this with and I should say, when I asked him, Uncle, are you still there? And I just knew that he had passed, he has left his body. Then instinctively, I just guided him through the next part, which is, if you see a light, this is what you do, da, da, da. And just talking him through it. And the interesting thing is, when I shared this story with his loved ones, it really gave them a lot of comfort. So I'm sharing this story with you because you never know which meditation practice will come to your aid, and you never know the impact that it will help you and those around you in what you do. And the other point of this story is that meditation is not just on the cushion. It's not just in retreats. It's not just in formal practice. It's something that is alive and something that you can take with you in your daily life, in whatever circumstance that you meet. So I leave that story with you. I hope you enjoy that and the lessons that came with it. And David, if there's anything you wanted to add, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I'll go through the chat and see what people have popped in there.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for that very heart-moving story. And, you know, the way that you told it, I could really experience that wonderful presence. You're a beautiful person, Tina. That's just something that brings in the essence of the Buddha's teaching to me, that you just responded to what needed to happen in that moment. And how wonderful. I wanted to say, I noticed in the chat, I was just looking through and I noticed that Belinda's saying, I'm new to meditation. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? You know, we've got beginner's mind here. Beginner's mind, Belinda, is a wonderful attribute where we assume that we know nothing and we just go fresh into the unknown. So what a privileged position you're in this group, because many of us are pretty seasoned meditators. What would it be like to be the first time? And I was just wondering, you know, what would be a very simple, and just we'll give a little brief sort of taste of beginner's mind for you, Belinda. And we'll just meditate on the breath for one moment. So you just all you do is just allow yourself to be held in the chair, then just allow yourself just to feel the feet under the floor. And you might want to let your eyes closed, or you can leave them open, it's up to you. But just let yourself sort of sink down and let go. Just like if I was to lift your arm up and let it go, we just go flop, everything letting go, no effort at all. And notice how easy the body feels just by letting go. And then we notice the breath coming in through the nostrils and out through the mouth. Just noticing. We can notice subtle differences in each breath. And when the body's completely at ease, we can ask ourselves the question, am I breathing, or is breathing just happening by itself? And in that simple contemplation, we open up a profound realization that everything is happening by itself. We don't have to make any effort. We just show up and listen and watch and experience. And we can do it anywhere, anytime, as Tina said, in ordinary life. This is meditation. And in a few minutes, we can feel the benefits of peace, openness, joy. So utterly simple. And then we can allow the eyes to open and come back to everyday awareness, which is not different from the meditative awareness that seems so profound. It's very simple. And here you are. So I'd like to hear, if you feel like sharing, what your first experience of meditation was like.
I do feel quite relaxed, but I don't know what's going on in my mind. I try to relax, and it's quite a nice feeling.
Yeah, so that's a perfect response. That you say, I don't know what's going on. That's sort of not knowing is actually a
That's right.
beautiful quality. Yeah, of openness, you see, to what actually is, rather than having any preconception about how it should go. So you immediately sort of entered into that, and it's only a few minutes, but if we, in our busy working life, during the day, we just take a few minutes off and just simply do that little exercise, it can change how we handle stress, and so helpful in a very simple way. So that's just a very simple introduction to meditation. Just wanted to share that with you. I hope it's made you sort of curious to look further.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David. And on that point about beginner's mind and starting your first meditation, it's really helpful for all of us, no matter how long you've been practicing meditation, to still encourage that, to still have that beginner's mind, to approach every meditation as if it is your first, because you don't know what's going to happen in your meditation. So not prejudging it, not having expectations that it has to be a certain way. And I often use this exercise, not just in meditation, but also in general life as well. So this is an activity that I would like to share with all of you. Maybe you can do some homework and let us know how you go next week. And the activity is that you live as if it's your first time. So sometimes in couple relationship issues, we have people who say to me, I've got issues with my husband and my wife. I don't understand them. I don't understand my kids. I don't understand people or a situation. So if you've ever felt this way, then maybe this activity would help you. So what can happen sometimes is we get really bogged down by our expectations, our judgments, our preconceptions. And so if you want to break through from that, the activity is that you meet this person or the situation as if you are meeting them for the first time. So in these examples, I would ask the husband or the wife to go home and meet their partner as if they're meeting them for the first time. And it's really amazing what can come out of that, because then they don't see them just as they normally are and their habitual tendencies, and they react in their habitual ways, but they actually see them anew. So the practice of beginning anew is something that in the Plum Village tradition that they practice as well, but I think it's really beautiful. And it's about being able to see things fresh, see things anew, rather than bringing all of the past and all of the hurt, all of the resentment into the situation, allowing that freshness as you let that go and start anew. So whether you do that with your meditation, so if you sit down in meditation, just allow this to be as if you're meditating for the first time and allowing whatever is to arise, or whether it's in a relationship, or whether it's in a situation, being able to see things differently, different perspective, or just in your day-to-day life, no matter what you're doing. So if you've ever gone on holidays, when you go on holidays and everything just to a very foreign place, how everything just seems really exciting and different, and you are fully present and aware everywhere you go. It's like, oh my goodness, that's so cute. That's so pretty. That's so wonderful, right? That's so different to what I'm used to. So your senses are alive. You're very present. You're not just in your head. And the reason is because it's a new situation for you. Imagine if you can do that in your daily life, no matter where you are. You don't have to go traveling. So tomorrow, when you walk your usual walk, whether it's from your car through the car park or whether you're walking to the train station, you may have walked that walk 100 times, 1,000 times. But tomorrow, the homework for you is to walk that walk or do whatever that routine is, but do it as if it's the first time you're doing it. And it's amazing how quickly your presence and your openness and mindfulness can be brought into that moment. And then you'll feel so alive. And the quality of your life changes as well, because you start to notice things that you didn't notice before in other people, in the world around you, even within yourself. Okay, so shall we go through some other things that's in here? So in the chat, we have some answers. We've got body scan. So that's from Vicky. Thank you, Vicky. So body scan is a really good practice. And David, feel free to jump in with any of these if you have any additional comments as well. Body scan's really good because we've always got the body around with us, right? So throughout your day, anytime, you can actually just notice your body, notice your posture, notice if there's any tension that you can relax. Because very often when we have tension in the body, we've got tension in the mind. When we have tension in the mind, we have tension in the body. So throughout your day, just being able to relax, let go physically as well as mentally. Okay, and Rizwan has offered self-compassion. That is really, really good, Riz. And good to see you, by the way. Yeah, like having self-compassion is really important. And come with that is self-love, metta, unconditional love, acceptance, forgiveness, all of those things. And again, not just on the cushion, but also every moment, right? Particularly when there are thoughts that aren't compassionate towards ourselves, that's the best time to practice this. David, anything to add to that?
That's a lovely list. And I just wanted to share a story you just remind me of with a friend of mine, an old friend from medical school. I often go visit. We have a game of chess together. And he was preparing a little sandwich for lunch for me. And you can imagine this sort of kitchen bench between us. I'm sitting on a stool, he's in the kitchen. And he passed me a glass of water and I put my hand up to take the glass. And it was a very beautiful crystal glass. And the glass fell down and then tumbled off the table and smashed to smithereens. The water was all over the place. And I just noticed my first reaction was to think, oh, he's so clumsy, you know. I went straight to judgment. And I didn't actually say anything, but I think it must have been pretty obvious that, you know, I took absolutely no responsibility for that. And he sort of came around and started cleaning up the glass and everything, wouldn't let me move until all the glass was gone. He was so sweet. And then, you know, we had a connection, a game of chess, and then I went home. And when I got home, I just, you know, had some time to myself, and I thought, maybe it was me who dropped the glass. And then I started realizing that, in fact, you know, I play a lot of golf, and I've had a sort of, you know, a chronic gradual weakening of the right wrist. And I noticed my grip is not nearly as reliable as it normally is. And I'd only just realized it. So in that moment, I suddenly became aware. I'm meeting myself anew. This is a new David. This is a David with a wobbly hand, and I have to remember that and factor that in. So I'm meeting myself as though I were meeting a new person. And I thought that's a great lesson, you know. And so I rang him up and I said, you know, look, I realized, you know, it was actually me who dropped the glass. And he said, yeah, it certainly was. You know? He reminded me very, very firmly that there's no doubt about that. So I was absolutely right. But it was a lovely lesson, you know. Who are we today? It's a good way to wake up in the morning.
Yeah. And also recognizing that our mind is different throughout the day and moment to moment. So sometimes I get people asking me about meditation, and they say, oh, I have great meditation in the morning when my mind is fresh, but I have terrible meditation at night because the mind is tired and sluggish. And can you see that judgment that comes in, right? But the mind is different. The mind in the morning is fresh. It's got energy. The mind at the end of the day, understandably, is tired. So having that self-compassion, not being so judgmental, and being able to see that we do change from day to day. And sometimes we may have that wobbly hand. Wonderful. Okay. Some other answers. So from Mushi, you've got breath meditation. Yes, a very, very good meditation, because like the body, the breath is with us all the time. Thank goodness. Okay. You stop breathing, you won't be with us. So yeah, breath meditation. But also the breath is a really good object, because there's not a lot of these body functions. Okay. There's only the breath that I know of, and the other one is you're blinking. And both of these body functions, you can control it, but also you can be completely unmindful of it and it would still continue to function. And when we're contemplating on the breath, we're actually doing neither. So we're not controlling the breath, and we're not just being unmindful of it, but rather we are mindful of the natural breathing. So it really teaches us about how to be mindful, but with equanimity, to be observing, but not to get lost in it and not to control it. So yeah, so great. Good to continue that practice with breath. Body scan, so that's another one that's come up again. Metta practice, which is good. So for those who don't know about metta practice, it's loving kindness practice. It's the practice of being able to share your loving kindness, your unconditional love to yourself, to your loved ones, to people who are neutral. They call it neutral person. So people like, the ones who you meet off the streets, you don't know very well, but you can still share loving kindness towards them. And you also can share loving kindness to the fourth category of people, which is the people that you dislike, right? So the idea is, as you keep practicing loving kindness to these four types of people, what you're doing is you're breaking down those barriers that we have. So instead of I like you if, or I like you but, rather it's just being able to I love you and I accept you for who you are, and not having so many of those barriers. So metta practice is beautiful. Metta is also one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, so the 4 immeasurable qualities. So you can practice all 4 together. And I love this practice. I practice this not only on the cushion, but definitely in my day-to-day life as well. So I hope you enjoy this practice too. So one is when you meet someone or you meet yourself, having that unconditional love, that metta for them. The second is the practice of karuna, which is compassion. So when people aren't doing so well, or you're not doing so well, you bring your compassion to wish them out of their suffering. The third is joy, piti. So it's being able to have we've got metta, karuna, mudita, I should say, mudita. Piti is joy in meditative practice. So we've got mudita, which is being able to be joyful for other people's good fortunes and yourself. Okay, when do you actually give yourself a real pat on the back for good things that you've done, right? So rejoicing in your good qualities, rejoicing in your good fortune. And same when something good happens to other people. We rejoice in that rather than having feelings of jealousy, for example. And then the fourth quality, which is so, so important, is the practice of upekkha, equanimity. So having a balanced mind, a calm mind that doesn't get swayed this way or that way. And the practice of equanimity also allows you to balance the other qualities as well. So this is something that you can practice in your day-to-day. As situations arise, bring up one of the Brahma Viharas. Use that as a way to develop these 4 qualities within you, and also to change the surroundings of people around you, as well as how you approach different situations that come up. Okay, so that's great. I'm just going to pause there to see if David had anything he wanted to add.
Sorry, I was just saying that's very comprehensive coverage of metta, beautiful. And No, I think you've covered it wonderfully.
Thanks,
you.
Tina. Yeah. Okay, and then the next is the traditional Japanese dance and Tai Chi. Wow, Moshi, you are so talented. So I actually hope Lakshmi doesn't mind me asking, but Lakshmi does Tai Chi, and I would love to hear from her if she's interested to share a bit about her Tai Chi practice and how it helps her with her meditation practice.
I think Tai Chi is meditation in the sense like you totally let go of everything, just very present in the moment. You just being aware, totally aware of your body, because in the Tai Chi, there's a lot of emphasis too about the posture, how you hold your body. So totally aware of your body, and then each movement, you are aware. Also, Tai Chi also quite emphasis on where you put the weight of the feet. Always like yin yang, like one foot is yin, so that means that carry more weight. Another foot is yin, that is like all empty, that's like you don't put so much weight on it. So you are aware of where you put your weight, where you how you each step, how you move, and also your imagination, like your mind is imagining or visualize each move, like because the Tai Chi is also martial art. So imagining there's an Emily in front of you, and you are as well as like moving your hand or your arms. You also imagine the energy that goes to your arm. So it's totally in the moment of like how you move, how you breathe, and how you carry your body. Is to me it basically is a movement meditation. You don't lie down, but you move, but you don't just move. Unconscious that you move with each move is a lot of awareness. You know exactly what you're doing. Your mind is totally in tune with the movement, and have a visualization or sending the energy, because what is the concept of energy follow thought. So you have the imagination. For instance, you want to punch the person. You don't actually, in Tai Chi, you don't punch, right? But you do have the intention and the energy of punching the person, and the energy will goes to their hand. And so I think it's absolutely a meditation. And also at the end of the practice, feel relaxed, feel energized, not like excited, but very calm, and you're really in tune with your breath, in tune with your body, actually in tune with nature, because the whole principle is based on yin and yang. So you always experience the opposites in terms of movement, in terms of body posture. And it's a very, what should I say, three-dimensional exercise, because you're aware of, not to control, but you really relax the body, so that every movement is not out of like use your muscle, but it's just totally moving your lower body really, and being aware of where you carry the weight. And it is, to me, is a very good holistic practice, not just for relaxation, and also for a chance to totally in tune with your body and your breath. And at the end, just feel energized and feel peaceful and joyful too, because the movement is very enjoyable. Well, I'm a beginner, so whatever I share is just sharing from an experience of beginner. So you need to talk to some master, who will tell you a lot more.
Thanks.
Yeah, Tina, I would also like to share, because since you're asking Lakshmi, about Tai Chi thing, I find that for myself, especially sometimes when your mind is very, very active, like at certain days you have like it's just monkey mind and it's like sitting down, it's becoming a little bit challenging at certain time. I find that when I do Qigong, I do Qigong.
Yes,
So
Qigong. Yeah.
yeah, so it for me it's like a combination of the it's a type of meditative practice
Yes,
actually.
yes,
So it kind of helped to because of the body movement, so your mind goes into the movement as well. So it's kind of like stop that monkey mind
yes,
going around.
yes, yes,
So
yes.
it kind of help as well. And also why I say it's meditative practice, because it's just same like meditations as you do, because you're concentrating on the breathing in, breathing out, and
Yes.
your movement. And at times where you will find that your mind's going somewhere, you find that your movement is not as
Yeah,
smooth
definitely.
as comfortable.
Yes,
And then when you
yes,
realize that, okay, bring your mind back. So
yes.
I find that it's quite a very good meditation practice as well,
Yeah. And
especially when our mind.
how do you feel after the practice?
Yeah, if you really have, for me, if I really
Mm,
have that full focus on the breathing as well as the movement, at the
mm,
end of it, you just feel very good, like, very energized, as you say, and very relaxed, and your mind's kind of like calm down.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Tai
it's very
Chi,
helpful.
yeah, similar experience. Yeah, it's very, it really like you sort of engage in with the mind, with the body, with the breath, and with the whole thing. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful too. It's you move very gracefully and yeah.
Mm. Yeah,
But
thank you for sharing, Lakshmi.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And someone on the
okay.
chat, Lakshmi, asked you, where do you learn Tai Chi? Because this person is starting to learn and they don't incorporate elements of breath, more on the form.
Oh yeah, actually, the breath. Well, my teacher always say, when you first start, don't worry about the breath, because when you worry about it, you become sort of nervous and tight. Your body become tight, not relaxed. And Tai Chi, the principle is you more relax, and they're more powerful. The whole thing is so. Because you actually like martial art too. When you fight, when you're really a good martial art person, I'm not sure whether you've seen movies. They can just move an arm, like, and then you can send people flying out, something like that. But it's actually possible, because what happens is when you're totally relaxed. So when people hit you, the energy goes back to them, right? Because you're so relaxed, you don't take in any force, so any force just bounce back to the person, and it's possible really for somebody who a real master can do that. Since somebody who's trying to hit, push them, anything, they push themselves back in the opposite direction. Yeah, so in a way, yeah, that's quite amazing.
Yeah, that is really amazing.
Mm.
When you get to that state, can you give us a demonstration, please, Lakshmi?
Maybe not in my lifetime. Because
Well, what I can do that is similar, not physically, but mentally, this is what we all can do, which is if someone comes with you with not physical abuse, but verbal abuse, you can also be really relaxed and be Teflon.
yes.
And then they can take it back.
Yes. You can try that. I think David wants to be back on the show.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Thanks for that guest appearance. Okay, next answer. So Eugene says mantras and gradually slowing it down. So Eugene, that reminds me a bit like what Chalkun King tells us, right? So you do Budo, but don't do it slow. You have to do like machine gun kind of Budo. So yeah, mantras can be very, very helpful, especially when our mind is just ruminating and thinking about other things, and having that mantra just to calm our mind down and bring it to stillness is very, very helpful indeed. Great. Okay. Faye said body scan, so another body scan enthusiast. Breath, good. As well as walking. Walking meditation is very, very useful. So similar to what we're just saying in terms of Tai Chi and Qigong, something physical sometimes is what's needed. And sometimes the way we walk is also really important too. So if we need to, you don't have to do slow walking. You can actually do running if you need to. If your mind is just so all over the place and it's really hard for you to slow it down, do some running. And then after the running, after a while, then you do some fast walking, and then you do some slow walking, and then you can sit. So sometimes that can be also really useful to bring your mind to that quiet, still place. Okay, Faye, you've also said set question and wait. That's really interesting. I do something, but I don't know if it's the same as what you do. So I'd love to hear from you, Faye. What do you do with that?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear that too, Faye.
Okay, I haven't done it for a while, but when something's upsetting me, for instance, I might just put a question out, what's this about? Or if it's the same old problem, same thing, what's the issue? But you have to wait. It doesn't, sometimes you get, but it might be a week, and it might be more subtle. You just notice you're not worrying about that point so much. But when you get an insight, it's really nice.
That's excellent. Excellent, Faye. So yeah, that's something that I have tried before as well. Sometimes what I do is in meditation, so just before meditating, I make a question.
Before, set the question. Yeah.
And then you just drop the question in and then just see what comes up. And sometimes also I encourage other people to do this if they're trying to figure something out about themselves, because sometimes there are things within us that we don't really want to see, that we've got walls, we've got locks, we've got things behind doors that we don't want to see. And it takes a lot of courage and patience to go there.
Absolutely.
And meditations are a really safe space for that to happen. So having your meditation practice, you can start with whatever people have said, body scan, start with compassion, start with breath. And then you get to a point where your mind is something you can work with. And then you're ready to look deeper. And that's when you can set your question. And I also encourage people to delve deeper than that. So if you find an answer to your question, maybe there's another question that may arise in relation to that. Generally, that question is, but why? Okay, so you go deeper and deeper and deeper until you hit a spot. And usually that spot is a really soft, vulnerable spot that you don't really usually get to. So it's a very sensitive spot. And then okay, I think I've got to the core of the problem here. So I find that that's very, very helpful. And meditation's a really safe space that you can explore that. So Faye, keep going. Sounds like you've got some really good practices happening over there. Thank you. Okay. Soph is curious about forgiveness meditation. Yes, excellent type of practice. David, anything you'd like to add about this? How to do forgiveness meditation?
Thanks, Tina. Yes, that's a great one. So it's I like the word. If you look at the word forgiveness, it gives us a clue about how to approach it. It's giving forth, which is letting go, basically. So when we meditate, we come into the present, don't we? We come into here and now. And really, if we look deeply, we'll see that the past is nowhere to be found and the future is not here. We literally are here as a fresh experience of ourselves. And we just have to ask ourselves the question, what am I holding on to in terms of self-judgment, judgment of others, and just asking that question in a very gentle way, and then the answer will come. And we can recognize the body, holding on to stuff. It can be tension in the body. We can breathe into it, and we start to melt. We start to open our heart to ourselves and to others. And there's a direct relationship between the pointing finger. If we point the pointing finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at me, so that any judgment of another person is also very much about me. I'm judging myself without realizing it. So forgiveness meditation is very, very powerful. And it's just a question of coming totally into the present, where time and space basically collapse. And this is it. And there's nothing. We're carrying nothing here. We don't have to carry a single thing forward. We really don't. It's a choice. Some of us make the choice to hold on to things for various reasons, but we really don't have to. We give ourselves permission to put that luggage down. So sometimes I just imagine, walking across the road, do I really want to carry all those heavy suitcases across the road with me? Could I just leave them on this side of the pavement? Well, maybe I could. So that's some ideas. So I hope that's helpful for you.
Thanks, David. Sometimes I do this exercise in a group, and it's quite a powerful exercise. So you can do it at home if you like, another homework for you. And please do let me know next week if any of this that you've tried out and how you go. So the exercise is that you put a chair and you kneel in front of the chair. And in front of the chair, you imagine who it is that you want to ask forgiveness from. So for example, if you feel that you've wronged, say, your mum or your dad, then you just imagine them sitting on that chair. And then you speak to that person and you ask for forgiveness in a really deep way. And I've had people do this and then they just break out in tears. Things that they would never actually say to this person, maybe the person's past, that what comes out is very genuine and very deep and moving. And it's very purifying, it's just like things that people have held in their heart for so long, and they could finally let it out in this way. And then the second part to this activity is then they sit on the chair and they imagine the people who have wronged them to be in front of them. And then for them to offer their forgiveness. And sometimes we find it hard to forgive people straight away. Like I've had people say, I can't do forgiveness. I've tried, can't do it, tried different meditation, tried different ways. So my suggestion is if you do find it difficult to forgive a certain person or situation, instead of going straight to forgiveness, start with understanding. Deeply understand this person. Try that practice of beginning anew. So instead of just seeing them through your lens and through your hurt and your pain, rather see them for who they really are, not in your eyes, not in your context, but who are they? And you'll realize that they themselves have their own difficulties and challenges and suffering. And often through that lens of understanding, then what arises naturally is deep compassion for them. Because people who are happy do not cause unhappiness to other people. It's people who are unhappy with their situation that often it's through that pain that they are doing something that is harmful and hurtful to other people, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. So if you tap into that pain, that suffering, that ignorance that they have, then the compassion will naturally flow. And through that compassion, forgiveness can flow as well. So I'll share that with you because sometimes that may do the trick as opposed to going straight to forgiveness. Okay, now we've got time for just one more. So this is a comment from Amy. So she talks about 7 factors of enlightenment and 4 foundations of mindfulness. So what are those factors? So thank you, Amy, for sharing this. I always really enjoy talking about these topics. 7 factors of enlightenment for all of us to practice. And as you practice meditation and as you practice the Dhamma, you will find that these qualities start to become more bright and prominent within you. So those 7 factors are, firstly, mindfulness, in Pali it's sati. Second is Dhamma vichara, so that's often translated as investigation of the Dhamma. The third one is virya, that's energy. The fourth one is piti, and it's piti with an I, not a Y, and that's like rapture or happiness. So if you feel piti when you're meditating, it's like your body and your mind is just full, particularly body sensations, full of happiness and rapture. Passaddhi is translated as tranquility or calm, and samadhi, the traditional translation is concentration, but also stillness. I like that translation better, actually. The mind becomes very still. And then finally, upekkha, equanimity, what I spoke about earlier. So those 7 factors of awakening are beautiful qualities that we can cultivate in our day-to-day. And then the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So just very quickly, those 4 foundations, essentially, these are the things that you can be mindful about, not just in your meditation, which definitely you can, but also in all the different postures as you go around throughout your day as well. So being mindful of your body, firstly, secondly, of your feelings. So the feelings we're talking about aren't emotions. We're talking about pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, and neither pleasant nor unpleasant feelings. The third one is of your mind. And then fourthly is of phenomena, right? So the Dhammas. So those are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. All of that is a way for us to cultivate our mindfulness and make it stronger. So we've got different things that we can contemplate on. Okay, so Amy, I hope that, is there anything you wanted to add with that, since this was your comment?
Thank you for your clarification. You went very well. I don't think there's not any more thing I can add. It is in the practice, right?
Yes.
It's just beyond words. You just need to practice it, right?
Yeah.
So through all those types of meditation that people mentioned, including yourself and David, right? It encompasses all the factors of enlightenment there, right? You see, you need the effort. Firstly, you need the mindfulness, right? Okay, so once you have the mindfulness, you have this, you are actually contemplating in the Dhamma, which is the mean you see anicca, dukkha, anatta, the impermanency, right? Okay, and because anything that's impermanent, it gives you suffering, dukkha, and if that is something that you out of your control, right? There's no self-entity there to control it, so you see anatta. So in all aspects of our life, if you can see these 3 characteristics clearly in your moment to moment, try to see that, right? That means in the bare awareness, you see things as they really are, not what you assume to be. So you're in a state of equanimity, right? In your daily life, try to apply in the daily life. So it's beyond meditation. Sometimes you also do what they call the pathless path under Rupert Spira. At the moment I'm going into it, right? We have some guidance on that. On Rupert Spira's, what they call his videos. If you are free, you have a look on his poem. So he said, being, right? Just being. I'm going nowhere, you see. So it's very good, the awareness in the awareness, just bare awareness, okay? Just in the being. So there's nobody experiencing, but it's just being in the moment. And then the 4 factors for enlightenment is all there. In our body, like you do the body scanning, your breathing and everything, you're walking, okay? Those are the body meditation in your walk. And your metta, the 4 Brahma Viharas, your loving kindness, compassion, mudita, your empathic, sympathetic joy, and your equanimity, upekkha. So when you use all these 4 Brahma Viharas, then you don't think of yourself, right? So through that, you cultivate the 10 wholesome states. So in the Metta Sutta, so we did very deeply also. That means almost word for word, we break the whole sutta up. So we go through the Pali, you see, Uju, Suju, you know, Uju means upright, Suju means exceedingly upright, Suvacho, you're obedient, Chasamudu, you're gentle, Anatimani, you're humble. So all the 10 perfections are there. So you're humble, you're obedient, you're gentle, and you are controlled in your senses. You're courteous, not impolite, and you're prudent, right? Nipakocha, apagabo, you're courteous. Kolesu ananugido, that means you do not hanker over families. Families here means religion. That means I don't say that my religion is good, yours is no good. My way of practice is good, your teacher is no good. You don't discriminate totally, right? Either in religion, in your country, or in your spouses, or in your, you know, relationships with people. You don't feel like I'm superior or you're inferior and all that, you see. I'm better learned, you know, in education than you, you know, I know more than you. All this is discrimination. So until you come to this, then you don't qualify, right? According to the absolute sense to share your loving kindness with people. So once you have these 10 wholesome states, which is the going back to the 5 precepts, right? You know, the non-killing, non-stealing, non-sexual misconduct, and the 4 verbal actions, which is non-harsh speech, slander, non-gossip, frivolous talk, okay, and non-lying. So these are 4. So 7 plus 3, the thought, your mindfulness of your thought, which is renunciation instead of, that means generosity instead of greed, hatred, and delusion. You take it out, right? Non-ill will, non-harming thoughts. So these are the 10 wholesome states that go against the 10 unwholesome states. So once you overcome that with all your effort, so you cultivate your effort, right, to remain, you know, in that wholesome state of mind till you attain Nibbana. So you have to make an adhisthana, a goal, to arrive at Nibbana, because that should be.
Amy, can I just tell you a funny story about enlightenment? This is
sorry, I took too much. I will stop there. Okay, I apologize. I will stop. Yeah, thank you.
Not at all. That was wonderful sharing. I just wanted to share a little story. Just to, I think you'll all enjoy it. There's a Buddhist master who's well renowned, and he's giving a talk about enlightenment, and he's waxing lyrical about the experience. And someone in the audience says, can you tell me more about this experience? And then suddenly there was a voice at the back of the room. This is very appropriate for me with my wife behind me. And she says, don't talk to him about enlightenment. He's not enlightened. He's never had an enlightenment experience. And everybody laughed. And it was a profound truth that was being conveyed actually in that setting. And that is that enlightenment is nothing special. Charlotte Shoko Beck wrote a book called Nothing Special. It's just ordinary presence, here and now, simple as a pimple. So with that, I'd like to throw it back to Tina, and I think we're having so much fun, we're going over time.
No, we are, and actually very soon I'll be throwing it over to Meredith, but I just want to say this. Thank you all so much for your contribution to the discussions today. I had a lovely time, and I hope you also enjoyed it too. But importantly, I really hope that these sessions inspire you for your own practice. Not only just about knowledge, but actually live it. Because the Dhamma is beautiful. It is something that will literally change lives. So having these practices in your day-to-day life, not just on the cushion, which is very important, but as I emphasize, moment to moment, that is where we practice. And that is also the beauty and joy of this practice and the togetherness that we have as friends as well. And so next week, David and I will be back again. Don't know what we'll be talking about. Would love to hear from you what you would like us to talk about. If you want to talk about your meditation, some challenges that you have, or even your day-to-day problems, which maybe we can talk about as well in terms, because a lot of the stuff we're talking about, it's not just formal practice, but it's about how to make your life more enriching and also to minimize the suffering as well in your life as well. So come back again next week. Would love to have you and your friends here again. And I will now hand over to Meredith.
Thank you so much, Tina and David. Every time when we have these dynamic duos workshops, time is running very fast. Nobody wants to leave, and it's always not enough. Yeah, so luckily that's why we have two weeks workshop. We know that one is never enough. So next week, remember to come back. I mean, I'm sure that everyone gets a tremendous value from this workshop. So many type of meditation. I particularly like Tina's description about having a briefcase full of your tools, a different type of meditation, so then you can open up and say, okay, I can use this one at this moment. I really like that. There's so many other types that I haven't really learned. And there's so many questions that I believe that many of you would like to ask. So come back next week. Bring more friends. Come back next week. I'm sure everyone will benefit from this workshop. And I'm very, very grateful for Tina and David. Both of them are very, very busy people, and yet they are contributing their times, offering dana to the associations to offer their teaching. So thank you very much. And if anyone would like to support the associations or both the associations for things that they do, please offer your dana generously. The link as Tina has put in the chat, or you can just check from the website. So for that, thank you all for being here tonight. It's so lovely to see everyone every Thursday night. And yeah, I hope everyone have a good night. And thank you very much.
Thank
So as always, we always like to have these sessions as interactive as possible. David and I, we don't plan for our talks, and we just like to go with the flow based on whatever it is that you bring up during this session. So we want to make this session as relevant and practical as possible for all of you. So I really do encourage you to participate today. So last week, we went through a whole heap of different types of practices, which was pretty incredible, and probably more and more that we can explore, if not in this session, then maybe in some future sessions. But what David and I thought we would do today is really talk about ways in which we can put not only meditation into our daily life, but also how it is that we can integrate that meditative aspect and the practice of Buddhism into our lives in a very natural and, as David may say, an easygoing way. So I thought what we could talk about today is pop in a question in the chat for you to think about, which is what are some challenges you may have with meditation or practicing Buddhism in daily life. So what you can do is you can write your answers into the chat. You can also unmute yourself and you can share a bit about that. And while you're thinking about that question, I'm just going to pass the mic over to David and see if David would have some wise words for us about practicing Buddhism in our daily life, and particularly how to integrate meditation off the cushion, as well as also encourage us to practice on the cushion. So thanks, David.
Thank you, Tina, and thanks, Meredith, for that lovely introduction. And yeah, like you, Tina, it's lovely to hear the way that that Meredith introduces it, because when she describes me, I think, because I always, when people say, who are you, every time it's sort of slightly different, but it's lovely to hear who I am. It makes me feel, great to hear that I'm, what am I, effortless and simple, and it's so true, actually. And it's good to be reminded of that. So thanks for that. Yes, so looking at our topic today, continuing on from last week, we sort of packed in a lot last week, and we're sort of looking at it in very practical way today about how do you translate this into your everyday practice, and how do you really maximize the benefit from it. So just as a simple example, today I have Margaret here, who is also attending my, I was leading the talk at the Buddhist Library today, and we did some, you know, I thought it was a lovely meditation on presence, and there were a few people there who, one of whom I knew from before, and another chap who happened to be a regular attendee of the Buddhist Library. We got into a conversation just after the formal meditation, and the meditation was about being the happiness or the joy that you are, essentially, and not differentiating so much from, you know, what you do on the cushion and what you do in your everyday life. And I didn't sort of have this in mind consciously, but what evolved as we had this conversation after the meeting was that, you know, why don't we go and have a cup of coffee? It felt like these two fellows hadn't quite finished. There was a very sort of significant conversation flowing on. So I thought, well, you know, the Buddhist Library is a place of silence, so let's go and have a coffee and see what happens. So we wandered up the street, and we ordered a cup of tea and sat down, and what flowed was just a delightful conversation with three men about their lives, and we had no plans, and the most intimate, you know, and vulnerable stuff came up effortlessly, and it was such a delightful sharing, because men in general, we tend to be, you know, competitive and careful about how we present ourselves. You know, I mean, women are so much better at this, but here were three guys, and you know, and I was just wondering what the people around us would have thought. This is some sort of a revelation meeting that was going on, but it was just delightful, totally spontaneous, innocent. And I thought a lovely example of the sort of thing that we're talking about. No differentiation between what we did in the library and really what we talked about, all the things that were so fundamental and important to our lives historically and in that moment. So that was a lovely example of how, you know, it can just flow from one to the other. So I'm wondering what other people's experience might be of how to, first of all, what are some of the difficulties and challenges we have actually sitting on the cushion, so to speak, or whatever posture. For me, it's mostly lying down, which you're allowed to do at my stage of life. But whatever posture you have and whatever way you approach the meditation, is sometimes we do it more effortlessly than others. And what are some of the things that you've come across that might get in the way of a deepening of the meditation? And also in your everyday life, because that's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? If it's not actually helping us in our everyday life, it's not of any value. So maybe I can begin with my own exploration and share a little bit of what's happening with my practice. To be completely honest with you, I never practice meditation because I like to be the meditation that I'm seeking to practice. In other words, I only do meditation when there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. So it's always a joy to me. I don't feel, oh, now I've got to do my meditation. It seems the idea of shall I meditate just arises spontaneously. And when it does, I'm so welcoming. And as I said, I've sort of got into the habit of lying down wherever I am. Usually there's a possibility of doing that. And I just drop into an effortless experience, first of all, of the body, and allowing it to feel held and totally sort of unwinding. And then that invites the mind too to sort of sink into an effortless state of presence. And from there, I can be very subtly aware of any subtle sort of contractions in the body that have arisen, and they do arise. And it doesn't matter how experienced you are as a practitioner, there is always something old or something new that sort of pops up and says, you know, hey, what about this bit? And so to be able to welcome whatever shows up in that moment is really my practice, and it's a joy to me. So I can't really say I have a great challenge because it's so much fun doing that. And I see you smiling too, Tina, so you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, and what I find also, David, is some of the challenges that we meet in meditation, formal meditation, are often challenges that are arising in our day-to-day life, even when we're not on the cushion. It's just whether or not we meet it and whether or not we recognize it. And so I find that there is that relationship between what happens on the cushion as well as what is off the cushion. So thank you, David, for that sharing. Very wonderful. And I see that Meredith has already popped an answer into the chat. But what I thought I'll do is give everyone some time to just reflect on that question. So what challenges do you have with formal meditation or practicing Buddhism in your daily life? So you can just take some time and pop that into the chat. And if you have more than one challenge, you are welcome to put more than one answer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you prefer to just speak as opposed to popping it into the chat, that's fine too. So you could just unmute yourself and you can do a bit of sharing.
I would need help from both of you. I'm just over 80, and I've been meditating for 50 years. In the 10-day courses at Wiseman's Ferry, I was doing all right, especially with the walking meditation, realizing the body, the 4 elements, etc. But when you age, things change. And also, for the past 10 years, I'm the head of charity organizations, sending money to the Hungarian-Ukrainian border, like 12-year-old Hungarian girls living in the Ukraine, serious spine problem, big operation costing a few million forints. That's the Hungarian currency. So Sunday afternoon, I organize dinner, $30 the entry. I pay $17 for the dinner, and the rest goes to the refugees, to Hungary. But my problem is, I sit there, and then my mind makes the program for that Sunday afternoon, or in a month's time, or in a week time. I organize some people who can recite poems or play an instrument, whatever. And I have to be careful. If the program is, or the afternoon is boring, they never show up again. And I won't be able to collect any money for the refugees. So sit down, rising, falling, the abdomen, rising, falling. Oh yeah, that poem will do. Rising, falling. I wonder what this musician going to play. Maybe I ask him to do some classical, rising, falling. So it goes on for an hour. So I'm very unselfish. I do my best. In the past 10 years, I sent $15,000 collecting from unselfish people. But the mind is always full. So I get up, and my lunch is 17 steps. And I'm thinking, how did the Buddha knew that my lunch is 17 steps? Because his walking path was 17 steps also. And this makes me happy. So that cheers me up. And of course, I'm just joking with myself. But the mind goes back to the program. How can I collect more money? Because there are 15,000 refugees in Hungary.
Mm.
And it's not a big, rich country. So it's, I feel sorry for them.
Mm.
But just an advice I can give to all of us: meditate while you're young. Once you get over 80, somehow, well, you're not just slowing down, but things get more difficult, not physically, but mentally. Somehow life was too long, too much in the mind. So you better start meditating when you're 20, and then we can learn. So if you can give me advice how to organize these programs, the charity afternoons, but how can I get out of it while meditating? What would you say?
Well, thanks for sharing, Frank. I'm sure David will have some comments to make about a lot of those, and I'll let him speak first and then I'll jump in. But just could I say about the age thing, you know, it's interesting because some of the younger meditators will say, oh, it's so hard for me to meditate because I've got so much I need to do. I've got so many things I need to think about. I don't have the time. Whereas if I'm older and retired, I've got all the time in the world to meditate. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, at a certain age that things are easier or not, but rather it's also about the conditions that we create in our lives, the space that we have for this and the priorities that we give to it and how we approach that meditation as well. I do have some things to say about that, but I would like to invite David. You can have first dibs, David, about some comments that you'd like to make about Frank's beautiful story and sharing.
Well, exactly, Tina. Thanks. And Frank, yeah, you're a legend, really. I mean, you're just so unselfish and so consistent in the way that you help your people, and it's very touching to hear that story. And I really commend you for your work. The only suggestion I have that might be helpful, Frank, would be to change your mindset from thinking of, instead of thinking about how can I get the donations to, you know, over to Hungary and Ukraine and making that the focus of the endeavor. Think of it more as how can we have as much fun as possible in getting together and make that the prime concern. In other words, make it something that's really people want to attend. And it might be just a slight shift in emphasis so that people don't think that, oh, you know, Frank's going to be after my money again. Don't you know, sort of don't put that on the program, you know, because what I find is that when people are having a great time, quite naturally, there's a metta that flows into whatever is needed. It seems that it.
Yes.
Happy, they're much more generous. And so think about, you know, what people would like to do to come together in a way that's joyful for as many people as possible. And make that your primary aim, I would suggest. And get yourself off the hook. And it's almost as if the donations will happen more spontaneously, I think you'll find, if that's shift is made. Because I can hear you as you're talking, the frustration starting to manifest, and that sort of negativity can actually block things in the real world. I hope that's a helpful suggestion for you. Yeah.
Thanks, David. Thanks very much. I'll think of it. Yeah.
And Frank, something to add to that is you were describing so beautifully about what often happens to all of us in our meditation. Here we are meditating, trying to follow our object, whether it's the rise and fall of the abdomen or the breath or whatever the object may be. And then our mind just thinks about something else. And then we try to bring it back and then it just goes and thinks about something else. And whilst what you're thinking about can be very wholesome in the sense of wanting to help other people, but during meditation, you can give yourself permission to just put that down, so that during meditation, you can enjoy being with your rising and falling of the abdomen. You can enjoy being with your breath. You can enjoy being with yourself and having that practice. So what you will find is that your mind isn't as scattered in meditation, and there isn't that tension of wanting to think about this and then wanting to come back and all of that. And why that's useful is Ajahn Brahm has a really beautiful simile, right? So it's about like, you know, if you have a cup and imagine holding a cup, and when you hold on to a cup for a little while, it's okay. But imagine having to hold on to this cup for an hour, for a day, for a week, right? What will happen? What will happen, Frank? Your arm will be so tight and painful. So what do you want to do?
Yes.
You want to put it down. And even if you put it down, even if you just put it down briefly, even if you just put it down for an hour and you pick it up, you'll find that it is lighter, right? Actually, the cup itself is not lighter, but it's because you've given yourself that break. And then when you pick it up back up again, then you will find that it's lighter. It's really the same with a lot of things that happens in our mind as well. So in our minds, we hold on to things. So for you, because this is such an important project to you, and it is such an important cause, and it is, that in some ways, because you hold it all the time, it actually becomes a burden. It becomes heavy. So allow yourself the time to just put it down, even if it's briefly. In meditation, just allow it to drop, just surrender it. You can always pick it up later if you want to, but give yourself that break, that mental break from it.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks very much. Yes, that's also very useful. If we still have time, I have one more short question and then I keep quiet. I promise.
You don't have to keep quiet, that's fine. I can see we've got 2 answers in the chat, and no doubt there may be some others that will come. So Frank, take it away and then we'll go to the chat and what is there. What's your question?
The question is, well, lately we had lots of problem in the family with the son-in-laws, and it's really hurtful and undeserved. So life was long. Plenty of suffering, was born during the war, grown up in a terrible communist system where you learned injustice and a lot of lies. So sometimes I feel dukkha, that there is dukkha, really. And people think that I'm in a mental rut with dukkha, but it is on my shoulders. So when I feel down, with the family, not because of myself. Devotion. You are fantastic meditation teachers, but when did you talk about devotion last time? May I ask?
Devotion, was it?
Devotion.
Yeah.
Devotion to the Buddha. So I go down to the park, I had a hip replacement, I need the walk, etc.
Yeah.
So when I'm not feeling 100%, I start Francis Story. You know Francis Story? He was an Englishman, lived in Sri Lanka, Ceylon in those years. And his poems are really marvelous. And then one poem after the other, while I do the walking meditation, comes to my mind, like old age, disease, and that such fires as these are burning ceaselessly. The Tathagata, freed from the burning house, lives tranquilly abiding in the woodland. Now this triple world, all is my domain. The living beings in it all are my sons. But now this place abounds with distresses, and I alone am able to save and protect them. And the Buddha, for the sake of them, preaches the way, tactfully saying, the cause of all sorrow is rooted in grasping. If grasping be ended, distress has no foothold. Forsaking all grasping is the gaining of freedom. If you are able to receive these words faithfully, you shall be able to enter the Buddha way. I recite 3 or 4 of these Buddhist poems, and then I'm happy and peaceful also. So devotion, I find, very rarely talked about, but it's very helpful when we feel there. The Buddha said to Vaka, that was his name, who was following the Buddha every minute, there's that tree, go down and meditate. But he told people not to worship him, but he never told them not to have devotion in their hearts to the Dhamma. So 50 years I've been listening to Dhamma talks, but very rarely I heard anything about devotion. A lot of technical things, but we know things, a lot of things we can learn, but we live according how we feel. Feeling is the whole life, not what we know. So thanks for listening to me. And then I keep quiet.
Well, don't keep quiet, keep talking, but thank you for sharing, Frank. And you're quite right, devotion is key. And you may know the Pali word satta, right? Faith is so important to this practice, absolutely. And you may remember last week I talked about anusati, so reflections or recollections. So there are different types of recollections. The one in particular that I was talking about last week was recollection on our good deeds, on our good qualities or virtues, so sila anusati. But there is also one, which is the first one, and that's Buddha anusati, so the reflections on the Buddha, right? So absolutely, exactly what you're talking about, reflecting on the Buddha, reflecting on his good qualities, reflecting on enlightenment and the possibility of that and the freedom from suffering. That is a recollection and a reflection that we should do often to inspire us to continue to practice. And life is full of suffering, right? That is the first noble truth. That is it. And suffering often is the door to our deepening of the practice. And what's really interesting is sometimes people come to Buddhism because of suffering, and sometimes they deepen their practice because of suffering. Whereas if life is really nice and there's no suffering and there's no problem, there could potentially be the tendency to become complacent in our practice. So having that suffering allows you to look deeply into life. What is the cause of this suffering? Why is there suffering? What is the way out of this suffering? And there, of course, is the possibility of that. And that is what will put into this energy within us, this drive and this spiritual urgency, some vega, for us to realize there is some urgency in this practice. We need to get out of this suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Tina. Thank you. Thank you.
David?
Yes, Frank, I'd like to put that question back to you, because the way you describe and you sort of longing for people to talk about and to focus on devotion, obviously, clearly, it's a very central part of what's important for you.
Yes.
And I wonder help us to understand, what is it that happens when you express that devotion to the Buddha? What change do you notice in your being, in your body, in your life? What are the benefits of that devotion in your own experience? I'd like to know that.
Peace and happiness.
Beautiful. Peace and happiness.
Peace and happiness.
So for me, you could say truth and peace and love and beauty. These are all words which point to the one thing, the undivided experience of our Buddha nature, which, we can certainly, and we mustn't exclude ourselves from that devotion as well, because what we love about the Buddha is also what we love about the Buddha within. In other words, we are Buddhas to be, if not Buddhas already, you see. So, and that's, we don't exclude ourselves from that devotion. And so the benefits are immediate. Once we're in touch with that generosity and that love, it's not a selfish love, like look at how clever I am. It's a selfless love, which flows into all the Buddhas, of which we're all part of that Buddhahood. And so devotion is central in every step that we take, every word that we say. I would say it's far from being something overlooked. I think it's so intimate in the practice that it's almost goes without saying. But I love the way that you've drawn attention to it, because you're quite right. That's a wonderful quality to make central in your practice. And I'm really grateful that you brought that up.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Very kind of you. Thanks.
Hey, thank you. All right, so David, let's go to the chat, shall we? So let's see what people have. And of course, if anyone is online, please add more to the chat and we can include that as part of our conversation. So David, one of the challenges that this person faces is racing mind, which is difficult to settle. Okay, how do you deal with a racing mind that's difficult to settle?
Thanks, Meredith, for posting that one. That's one that so many of us have trouble with. I'll share my approach to that. My approach is to be aware of whatever appears in awareness, whether it be racing thoughts or some challenges in bodily sensations or feelings which arise, and to see them as sort of like they're appearing, like all our faces on the screen. So once I identify with thoughts and they're racing and I'm chasing after them, I'm caught. And one thought is going to lead to another, and sort of pretty soon I'll be lost in racing after the racing thoughts. But if I can rest and abide as my Buddha nature, if you like, or the pure awareness of these thoughts, then they can race. And what I usually find is that the racing thoughts actually run out of puff without any help from me, awareness at all. That they're just I welcome whatever thoughts arise, and I just notice that thoughts are racing. I'm very aware that last week, when I thought I wasn't going to be able to, get my personal hotspot humming, and I was panicking and my thoughts were racing and thinking, oh no, I'm going to let everyone down, and blah de blah de blah. And so fortunately, I was able to witness that and not sort of get lost in all of that. But that was evidence to me that I need to settle down. And so that was the focus, if you remember, at the beginning of the session, was just to recognize that the thoughts are racing, and recognize also what's a wise approach to that is to not try to fix it, but just to recognize it, and what would be the most helpful thing that I could do about that in the moment, which was to open up to the wonderful presence of all my participants who happily sent me loving kindness and Tonglen meditation, which settled things down immediately. So it's moving from trying to fix the racing thoughts to seeing it as evidence of me needing to just come back to the peace that I am. What's the most prescient? What's the wisest and most available opportunity for doing that right now? And it's not to wrestle with the thoughts. It might be to focus on the breath, which is just something so utterly simple. Maybe it's just to focus on my being held in this chair and just settling into it, and just focusing on that. Automatically, the byproduct of that will be that thoughts begin to settle down as well. That's what I usually find. So I hope that's helpful. And I'm sure, Tina, you've got some great ideas about this too.
I don't know about great ideas, but I can tell you, having dealt with a restless spine, because it's one of the hindrances. So I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. So hopefully some of these tricks will help. Sometimes what can be very useful is recognizing that your mind has been racing throughout the day. So when you come and sit down in meditation, understandably, that momentum is going to continue, and just being patient. Sometimes just allowing that time for the mind to settle is really all the mind needs to do. But what can happen is we sit down in meditation, and the first 5 minutes is like the mind is still racing. What am I going to do? And you start panicking. Another 10 minutes passes. Why is it not settling? And then there's like all these thoughts and guilts and trying to control and trying to do this, because we're all doers, right? A lot of times we're just doing things. And actually what we're doing is we're stirring things up, right? So I usually have a meditation jar that I like to show people. So just imagine a meditation jar. All it is just a jar with water and some, I usually have like some glitter in there, right? So you're shaking constantly. So I'm shaking this glitter jar, and the glitter is flying everywhere. And the more that I am shaking, the more glitter there is. How do we get the glitter to settle? We have to put it down. Firstly, we have to stop shaking, but eventually we have to put it down. So it's like our mind. What can happen is we're constantly shaking our mind. We're constantly stirring. We're constantly thinking about not thinking, which is just continuing to stir. And what we need to do is we need to first stop that movement, and then we learn how to put it down. So earlier, David was talking about having one object like the breath. Very, very useful. So when we practice samatha practice, it's very helpful with dealing with the restless mind, because it allows our mind to settle and calm by giving it just one object. Rather than thinking about lots of things, we just have one object for the mind. So if you find that the breath helps, the breath is fantastic to use. If you find that you can't feel the breath, use your whole body. If you feel your whole body and sitting is not enough, do some walking meditation, right? If you do think slow walking isn't going to work, walk a bit faster, right? You can even start with running and then move to walking in a faster pace, and then from walking into a slower walk, and then from a slower walk you may start to stand, and then from standing you can sit, right? So work with your mind where it is without that resistance and without that control, but just being patient, loving, kind, and respectful towards yourself and the mind. And then you'll find that as you keep practicing more and more, your mind will get used to, oh, okay, this is meditation time. When I meditate, this is a time for me to not be like a monkey running around the way that I usually do. So the mind just needs to be trained and needs to have that practice. And importantly, remembering that restlessness is one of the 5 hindrances. And I'll talk more about the hindrances shortly. But why I find it really useful is by knowing the 5 hindrances really, really well. When restlessness arises, you know, aha, I know what this is. This is restlessness. This is what I need to do. As opposed to, oh, I can't meditate. I'm a terrible meditator. I can't do this, right? So instead of thinking that way, you just realize, okay, this is a challenge. The hindrance has arisen. Know it very well and know what to do with it. Okay, so I hope that those tips help you, and keep practicing. Okay.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, David.
The next is from Michelle, and she says, I am unable to focus during meditation. Sometimes I doze off a few times during meditation. Okay, so David, what do we do when there is that sloth and torpor drowsiness in our mind?
Well, I think that's another common one, and that certainly happens to me sometimes as well. And that I love those words, sloth and torpor. That's they sort of conjure up images of, you know, complete somnolence, don't they? And I think, again, I tend not to wrestle with those things. It's sometimes if it's sleep that we need, it's okay just to indulge that and have a little period of time just allowing the sloth to slow us down to a standstill. That's fine. And then once we've had a little bit of a rest, we might find we're fresh enough to then come back to the meditation in a very different way, rather than see it as something we have to wrestle with, which is just going to make us more exhausted. Not to see it so much always as a resistance, but an invitation to doze off. And surprisingly, those little, what I call power naps, can be extremely beneficial. I've got it down to a fine art now. You know, I can do it when I'm playing golf. You know, people don't know it, but I'm a walking zombie sometimes if I'm tired, and it refreshes me very quickly. So that would be my approach: is not to resist what shows up, but to see it as that's what needs to happen, and it just in that welcoming. Whatever happens, I welcome it, and if it's that, well, so be it, and that becomes part of the practice. And then so we don't have a preconceived idea of how the meditation, what it should look like, but it's what's happening right now. That's something, and the welcoming, open-hearted listening and welcoming with whatever shows up, that is meditation. So what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, David. So I'm really curious, where do you nap when you're playing golf?
Well, no, it's like a walking meditation, right? So most golfers are, you know, they're busy chatting, filling up all the spaces, and you know, and there's a sort of competitive atmosphere. So what I'll do if I'm feeling, you know, very tired, I've got a wonderful little gadget on my buggy, which is a little seat that's attached to it. So I can go off in my little corner, and somebody's, you know, about to hit the ball, and I can sit on my seat, and no one knows it, but I'm doing a sitting meditation at that time, totally, and I'm just sinking into it and just letting myself be totally held by this little seat. And it takes, you know, a couple of minutes of that, and the sloth and torpor take over, and you know, I'm ready to go again, and no one knows what I'm up to. They just notice that David seems to spend a fair bit of time on that seat, you know, but it does me a power of good. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, so really knowing yourself and knowing what you need. So if your body and your mind needs that in that moment, just allowing yourself, give yourself some slack and just allowing yourself to have that. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier about 5 hindrances. So guess what? Sloth and torpor is one of them, right? So drowsiness, when it arises, that's one of the hindrances. So know it really, really well. I used to struggle with this a lot, right? I would sit in meditation because my mind is always like going during my day to day. And during the day, I would never sleep, okay? Unless I was sick. Okay, I don't do afternoon naps. But when I sat in meditation, I was out so quickly. So I then made it a point to really get to know what is drowsiness. And you can try this next time. It's actually very fascinating. So you try to catch when drowsiness arises, right? Because when drowsiness comes, generally you will know after you've fallen asleep and you woke up and you're like, oh, what was that all about, right? But that's actually towards the end of it. Drowsiness often arises in more subtle ways, so you get to know it. So for me, I don't know about you, but for me, usually when drowsiness arises, my mind isn't as sharp and the thoughts aren't as connected. They're a bit disjointed. I may see certain images, right, that are not really making a lot of sense. Basically, it's like the start of a dream or a start of sleep kind of thing. So when that starts to arise, I can feel the heaviness in the mind as well. So when these start to arise, I'll be like, okay, this is drowsiness. This is the start of this hindrance that is about to arise. So that's when I know I need to do something about it, right? And as you get to know this hindrance really well, you'll start to see that there's almost like these two options for you in that moment. If you just allow yourself into it, like what David says, then you'll pop into that sleep, right? Or if in that moment you deal with it by bringing in more energy, right, into your meditation, by being more alert, right, putting in more effort, you will find you will actually ride through this drowsiness, So it depends on whether this is a hindrance that has arisen, or do you actually need the sleep, like what David said. If you actually need the sleep, have your nana nap, right? Have your power nap that you need and come back and refresh. But if you're finding, like what I was going through, every time I was sitting, I was falling asleep. This wasn't because I needed the sleep. This was because it's a hindrance. And so getting to know this hindrance really well, and because you start becoming really interested in the hindrance, guess what? You're not sleepy anymore, right? Just like if boredom arises in your meditation, you're just a bit bored, then you ask yourself, what is boredom? Get to know it really, really well and be fascinated with boredom. And the moment you become fascinated with boredom, boredom disappears, right? So it's the same thing. Get to know these hindrances. Get to know, what is it? The first one is restlessness, right? The second one is sloth and torpor. And the third one is sensual desire. The fourth one is ill will. And the fifth one is doubt. Okay, and I can talk more about them if we have more time, but if not, you can look them up. 5 hindrances. Last week I talked about having a briefcase that I take to work or in my day-to-day. And in that briefcase, I've got different meditation tools, and depending on what I need, then I bring up the meditation or I bring up the quality that's needed. So the briefcase for this week is the 5 hindrances. So when I go on retreat, when I go in meditation, these are the 5 hindrances I need to watch out for and to look at. One more thing about energy. So I find that when there is drowsiness in the mind is really dull, that's when I need to put in more energy. You need to know how to balance your energy in your day-to-day as well as in your meditation. On the other hand, if you have restlessness, you actually may be putting in too much energy, right? Like too much control, too much effort in a tense kind of way. So you want to just lighten that a bit, let go of that a bit. And then you'll start to find that you can balance yourself out, not fall into restlessness and not fall into sloth and torpor. Yeah. Okay. So hope that helps you. Now let's go to the next one. So this is from Margaret, and Margaret says, over the years, my meditation practice has evolved from a regular morning session to a more fluid experience, often in response to the beautiful landscape I live in. Oh, good on you, Margaret. However, there are periods when I get distracted, and it might take a few days or even weeks to me from the getting it right to get back to the simplicity of focus, leaving distraction behind. Okay, interesting. All right, David, what do you think about this?
Well, I'd love to hear from Margaret about this environment that she lives in, and this, because as I read your chat description, Margaret, I experienced it as a sort of a narrative which took me somewhere. So I'd love to hear you speak to this issue that you're dealing with. I think there's something for us to learn from your experience there.
Thank you. Where do I start? I live down in Victoria on the Great Ocean Road, and I have both the sea and the bush, and it's a very wonderful and enormously varied landscape. And often when I'm out walking, I realise there's just something. It becomes like a walking meditation quite spontaneously. And I do find anywhere around the place, I can just suddenly find myself in that meditative mode. Sometimes it's just like paying a different sort of attention. Yesterday, I was just out on a path near the cliff and suddenly saw these tiny little brown eyes staring at me. And it was a little bush rat eating. And I just felt so lucky to have seen it, but it made me want to just stop and appreciate that moment of seeing that and being there in that proximity to that little animal. I guess in contrast to that, sometimes it can be so beautiful, it's the environment is distracting. And that's when sometimes I feel, I think some deeply embedded thing about getting it right, about ways of meditating, and however my brain tells me that's nothing to do with it, it can creep in every now and then. And it can become, that in itself can become a distraction that I find I need to work my way out of. And sometimes I think, well, if I went back to that earlier practice of just sitting there, maybe it will come, but I don't usually find that works. So yes, I think that's the best I can describe it.
Yes, I think that's a great description, and you know, so lucky to be between the sea and the bush. Wow, that's a place to be, isn't it? The experience, of course, you've named it, of being overtaken by the beauty and sort of that becomes a distraction. That's very true. We can become attached to those feelings, those experiences, and it can get in the way of a deeper presence, which is actually neither high nor low, but it's just it's here now. It's a sort of slightly more subtle experience of presence than being carried away. Like we can get carried away with our thoughts, we can get carried away with our feelings too. And I think you've the way you describe it, you know exactly what I mean. We can that can be a way of avoiding it, some deeper experience of presence, which is really what the aim of the meditative approach to life is. So it's good that you can actually catch yourself, because most people would see that as, oh, this is the aim of it, but it isn't, is it? It certainly can be a distraction, and then we go looking for that, searching for it, rather than meeting whatever arises. And you know, so it's this lovely little animal, but it can also be something. It's interesting. I talked last week a little bit about photography, and one of the people who taught me Miksang photography, which is a type of Tibetan practice of being in the moment. She found herself just noticing a little white plastic bag by the side of the road, and it was something that was far from beautiful in our conventional way of looking at it. But she took out her little camera and found herself attracted to this, and she took a little picture of this. And just as she was taking the picture, the wind sort of arose and turned it into a particular shape that was unpremeditated. And it was a magnificent picture. It looked like the Himalayas, something absolutely just an unfoldment, which was just a pure simplicity of whatever arose, and it was not conventional beauty in any sense at all. So you've highlighted something I think very interesting, and the ordinariness is closer to presence, isn't it, than the splendor?
Mm.
Yeah. So I hope that's useful.
That's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing, David. And Margaret, I echo what David said. It sounds like you're really lucky in the place that you're in. And I wonder if some of those feelings that you feel during your walk, those feelings of peace, and perhaps even some gratitude, appreciation, and joy, if you can actually bring that into your heart and into your meditation and use that as an object of your meditation. So for example, if you're feeling so much gratitude for having this space, being where you are, or that feeling of peace or love, and using that as your object of meditation, and then imagining yourself being able to share those qualities and those feelings with other people. And may other people feel that peace. May other people feel that happiness that you feel, right? That's actually a practice too. So we practice, for example, loving kindness meditation, metta meditation, where we can spread our loving kindness to all beings. We can spread our compassion to all beings. We can spread our joy to all beings. We can share our equanimity to all beings. So the 4 Brahma Viharas. So you are a living embodiment of those qualities, and you can exude those qualities in your day-to-day as well as in your meditation as well. And when you meditate in that way, it's like you are in the God realm, because you fill yourself with these beautiful qualities and you infuse your whole mind with that, and your mind becomes very light. Because as you know, when your mind is peaceful, when it's loving, when it's open, you then don't have its opposites. You don't have the negativity, right? And so what you're actually doing is you're purifying your mind with that practice. So I hope that helps. Have fun with that.
It's wonderful.
Okay, all right, so let's see what else we've got here. So we don't have any other answers. Does anyone else online wish to share or anything? Otherwise, I'm going to pop another question in here. And the question...
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in last week's dialogue, we learned many different type of meditation practice. If any one of you missed that, you can just watch the video. So in the first meditative practice that we discussed last week is Tonglen meditations, where it's a type of meditation that practicing compassion to help to alleviate the suffering of others. So David has demonstrated, live last week about how we can help practice this Tonglen meditations to help alleviate David's suffering. But David was, you were saying that you were open to receive that, the compassion, the meditation, the people are practicing you, the energy to help you. But my question is like, what if you practice the Tonglen meditations to help somebody else that is suffering? What if they are not open to receive, or they're not even aware? So do you think that it will still, help in some way to practice these Tonglen meditations, to especially helping people that are suffering?
Well, thanks, Meredith. Yes, I think you've raised an important point, that the idea of helping somebody and that arising out of a need that this one has to be of value or of help, that can be a self-centered approach to something, rather than being in tune with what's invited or what seems to be required. We're not sensitive to what wants to happen in that moment, and what might want to happen is not that I'm wanting you to fix me up. It might be that I want you to leave me alone. So I've got to be sensitive to pick up, what's actually going on, not just in me, but in the environment, in others. So yeah, I think it's something that can be too intimate for some people. They're not ready to be able to meet us at that level. So it requires sensitivity, doesn't it? And I invited everyone to send their loving kindness to me. I was very open to it, and just the awareness of that's what was happening in the group, and trusting the group enough to know that with my inviting that they would respond to that. It was a palpable shift in my sense of distress at not being able to show up, and the effect was immediate. But if it had turned out that it was some sort of exercise that was being done and there was no need for it, it would be a very different experience. So I think you've highlighted a subtle point there, Meredith. Yeah.
So it's very similar to sharing metta, right? So whether it's Tonglen practice or us spreading our metta, I've had people ask me, if I share metta or I spread metta to other people, do they really get it? Right? And the answer is yes, but really, even if they don't, does that make a difference for you? Because the reality is, if you are sharing your metta, or if you're doing Tonglen and you are then taking on their suffering and you're giving them your compassion, if they don't receive it, you get the benefit of it. So there's already a notable shift within yourself. So if you're doing the metta practice and you're doing Tonglen, then there is a shift in yourself already. And that then changes your interaction with that person, as well as your interaction with the whole situation. So it can be particularly helpful in situations where we feel like a bit helpless. We don't know how to help the other person. We don't know in what way we can help them. But by doing this practice in itself, it allows you to feel that actually you're not helpless, that there are things that you can do, that you don't have to go into that situation with anxiety and stress or worry or whatever it may be, or anger or frustration, but you can actually go in there with an openness, with a love, with equanimity, and with courage to meet whatever it is that comes up. So I think that the practice does work. I've seen that happen. I've felt that happen, whether it's receiving or sending metta, whether it's receiving or sending Tonglen. But even if you don't believe that, right? Even if you don't believe that that could work, just doing it in and of itself, you yourself are embodying that. So what I was saying to Margaret earlier, you yourself embody the metta. You yourself embody the compassion. And that's beautiful in and of itself.
Yeah, I think most of the people here, meditators and things like that, I think we normally are at the giving ends, like, we know how to send metta to people, Tonglen and all this, like, wishing them to, they have less suffering. But I think very important thing is also many people do not understand, like, to open and receiving is also a good practice. So I think it's good to remind ourselves, like, when sometimes when people send you, I'm happy with my thoughts, I'm sending metta to you. So I think at that point, just be open, like what David do, like just be open to receive that. Maybe you probably will feel that energy more when, especially when you know that people are trying to send you that metta or, that loving kindness.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think ourselves as well is like, we sometimes forgot to, like, we were just trying to give people, but then we forgot to, receiving that. So yeah, David reminded me of, like, sometimes we do have to receive that as well, right?
And if you're finding that you're not receiving, or there's some resistance, because some people are like that too. Some people have that wall up, like, I'm fine, you don't need to send it to me, just bypass me and go to someone else, right?
Yeah.
Or compliments, right? Some people really struggle with receiving compliments. When someone compliments them, they'll be like, nah, that's not me, or they'll downplay it. And often I find that by allowing us, as you say, to open to that, to receive compliments, to receive love, to receive other people's help, is a really beautiful way to build connection with others and with ourselves. And looking at, why do we have a wall up? Is it because we feel we don't deserve it? Is it because we don't love ourselves and therefore we can't receive love from others? Is it because of what, right? So just even looking at why is that wall there? Why is it that we can't open ourselves to it? Can be very enlightening as to what's going on inside of us.
True, yeah.
And some people actually enjoy the game of suffering, don't they? There's a story of the women that used to, meet for high tea at the Hydro Majestic up in the mountains, a group of 6 ladies, and they would always sit around and complain about everything. They would, the weather was bad, and the tea and the scones are not quite as good as they were last week, and on it would go. You see, and they were having a great old time, just complaining about everything, and the waiter would come over and he'd join in the game, and it would be, so is anything okay, ladies, today, you know? So yeah, we have to be sensitive. You know, some people, you know, they'll hang on to it and they want to stay with it. So you have to know when people are saying, look, can you help me lift the load, or whether you know you can join in the game. That's a different sort of story. Can I just ask Belinda that I was delighted to meet you last week and hear that you were new to meditation. And I'm just wondering, you're back again this week. What is it that you found of value in this introduction to meditation? What's working for you and what's not?
Well, David, thanks for asking. I would start by saying that, yes, meditation is a great challenge. But however, after listening to what you said last week, I was actually wanting to ask you. I said, yeah, Tonglen was the term that you were mentioning. And so little did I know that I was actually practicing that, because I was trying to pray for a friend who is actually rang me, and she said that she's suffering and she's having a lot of medical condition and problem. She had 4 spinal surgeries, and now she has some heart problem, and she's going to have this. She's getting kidney failure. The latest was she was having numbness on her left hand and pain right up to the whole hand. So I thought to myself, oh, you poor thing. I don't know how to help you, but all I could say is, I'll pray for you. But I didn't tell her that, because she's a very staunch Buddhist, a Christian, and I believe in my own way in prayers. So I started praying for her, hoping that I could take away her suffering and relieve her of some pain. Now, Meredith came up with a very good question. And I thought about it. I said, now I start praying for you. You are a Christian, but I'm a Buddhist. Are you receiving it? Are you getting the benefit of my prayer? But on the other hand, I tell myself, well, I pray very hard for her so that, you know, I felt that I'm doing some good thing, and I feel the comfort in saying a prayer to relieve her pain. So I just want to say to you, David, and to Tina, that tonight's lesson actually taught me a great deal, that what I've been practicing in my own way, I resort to prayers. And because I felt a sense of fulfillment and comfort in helping others. But, you know, for years I've been trying to meditate. And then, like what you said, you know, breath in and out, abdomen in and out. Nothing came of it. And then my mind strays. It just, but I've learned something from last week's lesson and tonight's lesson, that it seems to work. So in some way, I don't know whether I'm doing the right thing or not, but I like to hear what you say.
That's delightful, Belinda. You have such a wonderful presence, I must say. And for you, the way you describe your prayer is a meditation. It's a type of meditation. It's you're sort of lost in prayer, and you find it very enjoyable and uplifting for you. And you may actually be the main beneficiary. Just as Frank was sharing about his devotional practice, this is similar in a way. And it's a beautiful practice, and it's whatever works for you. If that's something that makes you feel uplifted and and in touch with loving kindness. What a beautiful meditation. You see, this is meditation, in fact. And it doesn't have to sort of fit the textbook definition, but this is a very valid way of helping yourself and others. And I love it.
Thank you.
Tina, what do you think, Tina?
I would be interested if you like to share. Who do you direct your prayer to? Anyone in particular? Like, so for example, I believe in Guanyin, so I
Yes,
pray to Guanyin.
I do. Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
I do. Yes.
Yeah. And that is definitely a beautiful practice. And I draw a lot of strength and compassion and lots of lessons from Guanyin.
Yeah.
So that's my devotional part of my practice. And having those prayers has taken me through a lot of challenges in my life. And also, last week, you may remember I told that story of my friend who was dying. And one of the things that I did, and I know that he also believes in Guanyin. So Guanyin actually played a big part of that time with him as well. So being able to offer him some solace, I gave him some beads with Guanyin on it. He actually asked to be buried with it, to be cremated with it. So it's beautiful that you have that connection with Guanyin. If you know others, and if you know others who have that connection, you can also draw on that too. And that's a nice way for us to offer Guanyin her strength to others as well.
Yeah, thank you. I agree what you said. In fact, I feel that I talk to Guanyin all the time too.
Yeah.
and I really feel a great comfort in telling her, the Guanyin, what are my thoughts are, and whatever the people that I wanted to help, I resort to Guanyin.
That's beautiful. Wow. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. And ditto.
Yeah, and also, Linda, as what Tina and David always says, that meditations is sometimes not just on the cushions; it can be off the cushions. So it's probably before you even aware that you've been like doing meditative practices in a different way. But of course, now since you come to this workshop, you have learned more methods, so you probably can practice different methods. So you are more aware of there are other type of meditation practice that may help you, like in many ways.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And chanting was also a samatha practice as well. So you can also use chanting, such as chanting Guanyin's name or chanting the whole sutta, say the Heart Sutra, for example. That is also a way to calm our minds down. So instead of the mind being very restless or drowsy or lost in one of the other hindrances, having a focus, which is actually the mantra or the chanting itself, becomes an object of your meditation, and it can be very powerful for you. So if you find that Guanyin or another type of chanting or mantra works for you, you can give that a go as well.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got just a little bit of time left. Gosh, time flies, doesn't it? So if anyone has any last questions or comments or just reflections as we come to the close of these 2 weeks, I'd love to hear from you.
Well, I've got a comment. I'm so delighted, Belinda, that you brought up, and Tina, you picked up the Guanyin approach, the prayers to Guanyin, because from my experience, I'm surrounded by Guanyins every time I click on here. It's wonderful to be in the presence of such wonderful women, but not just women. It's really beyond gender description, isn't it? It's that beauty and sincerity, whatever qualities you attribute to Guanyin is very palpable here. And whenever we come together with that intention to meet and to share the Dharma, I feel just so grateful. I'm sitting in her lap, and so I just want to thank you all for being here.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tina and David. I really have learned a lot since last week and today, and I feel a lot better. But
Wonderful.
yeah.
It's wonderful.
That's great. Thank you. It has been such a joy and pleasure to share these 2 evenings with you all, and I really look forward to our next meeting together. I'm now going to pass the mic over to Bodhisattva Meredith over there.
Oh, well,
Close the session.
forever grateful for Tina and David. So every time they come in, bring in such their knowledge and their compassions to all of us. And next month, very happy next month, they will be back again for another 2 weeks of workshops in August. And if any one of you would like to have a certain topics that you would like to discuss, please just let us know for the next workshops. So and for, as I said last week, we discussed a lot of different type of meditative practices by Tina and David. So I also put the link at the chat, or you can check out our YouTube channel. So you can, if you haven't, if you didn't attend the last week one, you can actually go and watch the last week's YouTube channels. And there's a lot of information that Tina and David has packed in a briefcase for us. And so I thank you very much, Tina and David, for always coming here to support the community here, to enlighten us, with all your knowledge and your compassion. For that, before I end, so I just have something to say to Frank. So Frank, if you go and watch a movie, will you enjoy a movie from the beginning to the end? It's nothing special happens, and it's just like no drama, and then so from the moment you step in the the theater until the end, will you enjoy a movie like that? You won't, right? So life is the same. It's always when you go and watch a movie, you always expect drama to happen. So like you are very blessed to have so many different drama and in your life that brings out like the color in your life, and each time the drama happens you evolve. So you're very high level now. So until the ending it's like, wow, we enjoy this movie so much. Same thing. So when the next drama comes, like, oh, you add another color to your life.
Thank you, Meredith. You're an angel.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
And we thank you for our teachers tonight, and also if you like what we do, both the association Metta Center has done a lot. I don't know how Tina managed. If you go to Metta Center's website, there's so many things that she is offering, and she's very busy lawyer as well. I really don't know how she can manage, and she can still sit here smiling, relaxing. If for me, then I'll be like, oh, scratching my head. Yeah, that is Tina, because it's very he's just like a bodhisattva. and David as well always bring his present to this sitting. So thank you all very much, and I hope to see you all next week.